Hello, and welcome back to another episode for the Project Seed Money podcast. I'm your host, Sharissa Bradley, and I am so excited to be joined today with cover designer Ashton Smith. Thank you so much for spending a little time with me and just answering my questions for my audience. I'm so excited to spend some time with you.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for having me. This is super fun. I'm super excited about it.
Yay! I just want to get right into it and ask, how did you get into being a designer?
Yeah, so when I was in college, I've always had a ton of different interests. And whenever I was in college, my freshman year, I was trying to figure out what I was going to specialize in and focus in. And I just could not decide what I wanted to do. And I remember being on the phone with my mom, and I was just like kind of lamenting about it. It was starting to get into the spring, and she was like, if there's anything in the world that you could do, what would you do? Like, money is not an object. And I was like, well, I think it would be really fun to like make the images on the front of books. And she's like, so that's a real job. That's something that you can go do. And I was like, this is it. This is my path. So in college, I studied both creative advertising and graphic design, just with like the sole purpose of getting into publishing, getting into book cover design. And I haven't ever looked back. It's been a dream, truly.
I mean, this seems like a silly question, but were you an avid reader? Like, what was your pull to the covers?
Oh, absolutely. So when I've always been an avid reader in high school, I was big into like OG Bookstagram. Like it's probably out there still somewhere that you can scrounge up, but I was posting like pictures for my 7 followers and like taking pictures of the covers and reviewing books. And then in college, I kind of had that experience already with social media that I ended up working for an indie bookstore in college for 4 years. So I did their social media and worked in the store. And like I've always loved books. So it really was just kind of like waiting to happen. But that moment of like realizing that this is a real job that like I can go do and I can build my career around it. It was like from that point on, I haven't looked back.
Oh, that is so cool. And it's so cool that your mom was there, like hashing it out with you and telling you, like, hey, that's actually someone does that. Like, it could
For
be you.
sure. Absolutely. Yeah. So it's always been kind of on my radar, but I've always had so many interests. But the good thing about being in publishing is that I have so many interests in all different types of stories. So that gives me the ability to work on all different kinds of stories and like still have that kind of jack of all trades interest, but just when it comes to books.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. It's the most not boring job on the
For
planet to
sure.
be in publishing. It's constantly changing. You're constantly having to learn new things, meet new people. It's never boring.
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay, so that I did spend a little bit of time going through your website and just kind of looking at like all these book cover designs that you've done. It's absolutely incredible what you've put out into
Thank
the world.
you.
So beautiful. But for my listeners who aren't exactly going onto your website at the moment, I wonder if you could share what types of genres you do or don't work with. Are there any specific that you just say like absolutely I don't do that, or are you pretty well rounded in that?
Yeah, I don't really have a lot of don'ts. I do fiction, nonfiction. I do fantasy, romance, thriller, all kinds of different things. I also do self-help. I've done memoirs. The only thing I really don't gravitate towards is typically anything that's like strictly history, like not a historical fiction, just a history book or just like a current events political book. That's just not where my interest lies. But honestly, my reading taste is pretty narrow, but my taste in design and like learning about topics is so wide that I love being able to kind of explore within those different design tropes and the genre tropes and all of those different things. So there's not a whole lot that I won't get in and get my hands on.
Oh, that's cool. That's fascinating. And I like that you do have some things that you're like, if it isn't in my wheelhouse, like that's okay. That's a total green flag to me to have like your things that you're into, and maybe even things that don't really speak to you that much, which I could see why
Yeah.
a history book or like a poli sci book would be like kind of outside that realm.
Yeah, I was having this conversation with someone else and I was telling them like anything that like a dad would read. I'm not really into like dad books, like World War II history, like that kind of stuff. But pretty much anything else I'm game. I'm there for.
Ah, awesome. That is so good. So that kind of leads me perfectly into asking about your onboarding process. Like as an author with a manuscript, what does that look like? And like how long should I plan to work with you? How long in advance to get on your calendar? Things like that. Like, and once I am on your calendar, how long do we work together? And then also, do you read the manuscript to like get an idea of it, or like how do you get the ideas? Like maybe kind of speak to those areas if you can.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I'll try to walk through as early in the process and we'll just kind of walk all the way through and we'll get all those questions answered. But I typically book out right now a couple months in advance, but I always tell authors sooner rather than later if you can kind of have an idea of your publishing schedule, because the sooner you have your cover, the sooner you have a tool to market with as well. And it just kind of gets everything rolling. So I don't need the full manuscript right when I start. So that's another great question is I don't read the manuscript just because my interest in design and topics like that is so much wider than my reading preferences. And also, I don't want to ever limit my ability to design a book based on the number of books I can read. So
Yes.
once I get you on the calendar, I will send the contract, the intake form, all that stuff. And in that intake form, I have probably 30 questions that I have in there of like simple stuff like title, author name, those stuff, but then also what the book is about, any main themes, any tropes, as well as like their design preferences. So if they have covers that exist that they love or covers that exist that they hate, color preferences, all of those things I kind of just let my authors word vomit and then I sift through and be like, okay, this is important to the genre, this is important to the story. We won't need this. So, and then I use all of that information that they give me to create the concepts. Cause I always feel like there's no better expert on the book than the person who's written it anyways. So I might as well just get it straight from the horse's mouth and go from there.
Yes. So then it's about a couple months out to get on your calendar. How long is the like mock-up process? Does that, and maybe it varies. I'm guessing it could probably vary, but is there like an average time that like once I get on your calendar, I can expect completed files in a certain amount of time? Is there an average
Yeah,
time for that?
absolutely. So I typically book by the month. And then what that looks like is I will have you submit all of the paperwork before the month starts. And then the week before the month, so the last week of the previous month, I will send over a concept document with two potential directions. That's kind of, instead of using sketches, I will use like existing comp covers to be like, this is kind of the space we're looking at for this concept and this concept. And then the author chooses, and then that gives us one full month to go back and forth on designs and revisions. And then by the end of the month, typically the author will have the final files and they will be ready to go. So if there's anything that's like super involved or working with maybe a custom illustration or an illustrator, that would obviously take longer. But for the standard cover, 5 weeks in and out, and then you're good to go.
Wow. Okay, so if I'm putting this all together, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm calling you, I maybe need to plan for like 3 or 4 months before I can even get on your calendar. And then once we are working together, it's another 4 to 6-ish weeks. So we're
Yep,
looking at like about 4 to 6 months, depending on like where the project is and the process. So that's that as far as planning goes and timeline goes, do you think that that's pretty like okay to suggest like if you're going to do a book cover design, give yourself like a good 6 months?
for sure. Yes. And that's also something a lot of my authors feel like they have to have like the editing and the manuscript finalized, and that's not the case. So 6 months out from when you want the files in your hands. But if you're still working with your editor in that time or the manuscript's not quite finished, I don't need that part unless we're doing like interior formatting or different services like that. But as far as just cover design, I can just work with the information you give me and you can work on the manuscript in the background. But yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, awesome. Do you do like a call to see at the beginning, or how do people originally reach out to you? Is that email or call, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so I have a form on my website that people can fill out just with like all the basic information. That way it's all in one place for me, but they can absolutely reach out on Instagram or email me and then I'll set them up with that form and we'll take off running from there.
Very nice. Thank you for saying that because I think
Yeah,
that it's the goal is to kind of like demystify this process, right? Because
for
if you're a
sure.
first time author, you have no idea what it looks like to get a book cover designed or what it looks like to work with someone, or that we have to plan this time kind of overlapping in the project. You're still working on the manuscript, or maybe it's in the editor, and you're working on the cover design all at the same time. So I think that's
Yes.
valuable to point out.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can segment them out if you want the project to take longer, but I think that's definitely something that it's like, is there a certain order I have to do this? And the production phase is pretty murky, or it can be as murky as you want it to be. So if you're working on everything at once, it'll all come together at the end, or you can go piece by piece. It's really up to the author.
Oh, that's good advice. Yes, because maybe you can't handle all of it all at once, and that's okay too. But just keeping in mind that it is like a process that does take time. And if you're reaching out to a cover designer, it's not going to be that month that it gets done. So
Correct.
and that may be even like a little bit of a red flag if they're just like right away, like, oh yeah, I can give you a cover next week. Like maybe,
Yeah.
maybe no.
Maybe not. Yeah, I
Maybe not.
agree.
So then I wonder if you know or you can kind of speak to what types of questions that authors should come to cover designers with, like prepared to ask in this type of setting. Like, what should they be asking you?
Yeah, for sure. I would say genre, like we talked about, making sure that their style kind of matches what you're looking for. So if you're reaching out to a cover designer that specializes in ornate fantasy books and you have a self help book, it's not really gonna line up. So making sure you're on the same page as that. Same things like making sure that they have good like contracts and a payment plan and a plan for revisions as well, like how many revisions you get. That's a good one to ask. I would also say depending on who you're working with and how broad their spectrum is of design, what their plan is, or if they have a backup plan for if the concept ends up going with like outside of their skill set. So, for instance, I am primarily designer. I'm not an illustrator, so there have been a couple projects where we've worked on a couple concepts and what the project really needs is an illustrator. So I will make sure I go out, I find the illustrator, I bring them along to make sure I can fill in the gaps of my personal skill set. So just making sure that you know that your designer's going to do the best for the project or that you're super aligned from the start of like their skills are going to match up. So we're good to go there.
Oh, that is so important to make the distinction between the designer and the illustrator. I'm so
Yes,
glad you brought that up because it's not one and the same, especially if you need
correct.
if it's like if you need a character drawn or something like that, that's where we're going for an illustrator.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you're wanting something that's really in depth or ornate, there are some illustrators that do design. I am primarily designer and I'm not as good on the illustration side. I've done pretty simple illustrations on my own, but there have been some projects where I had to go seek out an illustrator and bring them onto the project just for the sake of like getting the author what they want and like the heart of the story. So just making sure that if you are looking for something that's more illustrative, you're reaching out to an illustrator who does design or an illustrator and a designer to make sure that you can like bring the vision together.
Perfect. Oh my gosh. Okay, I love that because I actually did not know that
Yeah.
until right now. This is never I've never and I interviewed an illustrator too, and I never even thought to ask like what the difference was or what the distinction between the two are. So I'm so glad you brought that up. Now that we've said the questions that people should come to you with, I wonder if there are some like key red flags in this industry that maybe like some of the answers to those questions, like if they're asking the genre question, what's like a red flag that would come up? Or any of the other questions that you mentioned, or even just like something that I wouldn't even think of, like, I didn't know there was a difference, right? So, what are some of the red flags that are in this industry and red flag answers to those questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So, genre, it's not going to be as much of a red flag, just making sure that you match on what you're looking for. But I would say if they don't have great like intake process or paperwork, like if there's no contract, if there's no payment schedule, those kinds of things, I would say any cover artist that promises to get you a cover back in a week, like we talked about, that's pretty quick for getting something that's really high quality. I would also say any crazy pricing, whether it's really, really low or really, really high. So industry standard is going to be anywhere between about $1,000 to upwards of five or six, depending on if you're doing a special edition or if you're just doing like an ebook cover. So anyone that promises to give you a cover for $25, you're probably going to get what you pay for. So I would be on the lookout for that as well. And then I know it's been a huge topic in publishing about AI. So making sure that they have a clear AI policy or asking them about their AI policy to make sure that they're aligned with your values and that you're all on the same page for that.
Ooh, I love that answer because some people do want to use and have that tool. So I like the way that you answered that with like it, you're aligned in there in your values, and I think that that's beautiful and important. So thank you so much for saying that because I really hope that we can help people avoid making these pitfall mistakes where they're spending the money and then that money that they spent ends up going nowhere or not being able to even use it or have that tool for anything. So I think that that's really really important. I do
Absolutely.
have a couple more questions for you. First of all, where can everyone find you and employ you for a book cover designer?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram and TikTok as Ashton M. Smith Designs. I'm also on, I have a website, ashtonmsmithdesigns.com, and then my email is ashtonmariesmith@gmail. You can shoot me a question. I will get you hooked up, but any of those places are great places to reach out and we'll go from there.
Perfect. And then my last question for you is just if you have any encouragement for my listeners, they are female authors, they're on the fence, and they maybe are being stopped by fear or maybe it's self doubt. But I wonder if you can just encourage them to just keep going on their path.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lot of still discussion about self-publishing and when people have really big dreams about being published by maybe a big 5 publisher or someone else, like I think right now is such a great time to be in self-publishing. So if those traditional publishing dreams maybe aren't working out right now, that might just be a sign that your book is so unique and special and just needs to be given the creative like energy and the complete creative control that it needs. So this is the perfect time and space to do that with social media. And there are a ton of readers who want to read your book, I promise. So putting yourself out there, not being afraid that people maybe aren't going to like your book, and to do it anyways, even if people are telling you no.
Oh, that is such good advice, Ashton. Thank you so much for being here. I'll make sure to have all your links in the description, but you can also find her services in the Project Seed Money directory. Thank you so much for spending a little time with me today.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Thank you so much for joining me on another episode for Project Seed Money. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. And I will see you with another interview next week. Bye.